Number one is our overall theme is a multi-agency collaboration, and we'll talk a lot about the multi-agency aspect of the project that we're going to talk about here today. This is a brief agenda of how we're going to approach this, and the times aren't absolute. They're just kind of ballpark for what we think it's going to take. And as much as anything, we want to spend a lot of time working to give you an opportunity to ask questions and provide your own input on the presentation. So what we're going to do is first give some welcome the introductions and project background, and I'll be handling that here. Then I will turn it over to Nancy, who I'll introduce in a minute. We will go to Sound Transit's planning perspective and King County Metro's implementation plan. So that's the general outline of how we're going to do this. And just to give you a little bit of background, Nancy is the assistant city manager in the city of Kenmore. Kenmore is actually the home city for the part of the project we're going to be talking about here, and the part of the project we'll be discussing is currently called the Kenmore Park and Ride. But there are many opportunities to be stepping beyond that particular facility in its current use. We have Juan Kelloff, who's a senior land use planner with Sound Transit. Juan has a lot of experience, and he's been heavily involved with this project, and I've had the opportunity to get to know him well, and he's got a lot to say about how our planning process proceeded here. And then Sarah Lovell will be the last panelist who will speak. Sarah is with King County Metro. She is Metro's transit-oriented development program manager, and she also is a former member of Sound Transit staff. So she will have her piece toward the end before we get into the Q&A. And then just a brief comment on me. I'm a consultant with David Evans and Associates, and I've worked with Nancy and Juan and Sarah throughout this process. So those are the introductions. So to give you a little bit of context, the city of Kenmore in Washington sits at in the northwest part of the country, and actually in the northern part of King County in Washington. Kenmore is the location of the park and ride. It is also a city that will have multiple stations on the BRT project. The map on the right shows where Kenmore is a little bit more zoomed in at the north end of Lake Washington. A little bit of background on the project. The overall project is a Sound Transit improvement that's part of the ST3 program that is an ongoing effort here in the Puget Sound region. It has been going on for several years and has a couple of decades still to run. And as many things have been affected by COVID, there are changes that came about because of COVID's impacts on the program. So a lot of potential changes are out there. But the overall project here is called the SR 522 Northeast 145th Street Bus Rapid Transit. In the future, as it gets developed further, it's going to be called the Stride S3 line. And it is part of a system that is included in the ST3 program. This particular project is 8 miles long. It includes 12 stations, 3 park and rides, and it provides connections into the Linwood Link light rail, which is also part of Sound Transit's expansion plan, although it's a pre-ST3 project that's currently under construction and is expected to open in 2024. This particular BRT will provide connection from the Linwood Link light rail to 5 cities and also to a stride ST BRT line in the I-405 corridor. So this is predominantly an east-west corridor that we're talking about here. To zero in a little bit, the connection on the west side where you see the blue-green line, that is the Linwood Link extension. There's a station that is currently under construction at Shoreline South and 148th Street, and it's in immediate proximity. It will actually include a connection to the Stride BRT. Stride will then go eastward. It'll go along 145th and then up and around the north end of Lake Washington and make that connection into the 405 F2 Stride line at the I-405 corridor. The park and ride we're looking at is under the word Kenmore that you see on this map, and it's got the letter P there, and that gives you a location for this particular project. So what our presentation is going to do is it's going to focus on the Kenmore Park and Ride. And at one level, at least as it was originally included in ST3, the park and ride was just what it sounded like. It was going to be a station with a park and ride, and it is a major park and ride. But around this plan, we've seen a coalescence of goals and participatory planning to create a real fusion of ideas about and plans and goals about affordable housing, transit-oriented development, and multi-party cooperation. The project includes an S3 Stride BRT station. It'll include 300 new parking spaces beyond a major parking component that's already in existence at this site. King County Metro, which is a separate agency from Sound Transit, owns and leases the existing site. St. Vincent de Paul owns the leased part of the existing parking site that King County Metro currently uses, and they also have an adjacent facility. And King County Metro and Sound Transit have worked closely with St. Vincent de Paul in developing this plan. Kenmore has a long-running history of working with St. Vincent de Paul as well. A couple of other features about the site are Great Blue Heron Rookery, which is a very interesting natural feature on the site. Juan and Sarah and Nancy will talk a lot more about that. And probably the most critical thing that led into this planning is that Sound Transit, Kenmore, and King County Metro are really committed to transit-oriented development, and especially to affordable housing. And that's a major component of what's going to be discussed here today. So our presentation focuses on the community-focused planning. The folks who are going to be speaking represent three of these agencies anyway. First, Nancy with City of Kenmore, then Juan with Sound Transit, and then Sarah with King County Metro. And I'm going to stop talking and start handing it over, and the presentation will go to Nancy first.
Thank you, Dwight, and good morning, everybody. Happy to tell you about the City of Kenmore, where I've worked for the last 13 years. And I need to do my video here. Here we are. And we really do see this as a tremendous opportunity to fully develop a key corner in our downtown area along the what we call State Route 522 corridor. So next slide, please, Dwight. This gives you a little bit of a close-up of the corridor. This is a state route, and we have 3 stations in Kenmore. The one on the right is the park and ride, and we'll also be showing you a little bit about the other two station areas, one at 68th, which is close to where I'm speaking to you from Kenmore City Hall, and then 61st off to the west. And you can see the proximity to Lake Washington and some other features as well. Next slide, please. We're going to cover these things, but I'd like to zero in on a couple of items. One is that we're a rather new city, and the development of Kenmore began in the 1920s. It was a community for a long time, but it only incorporated in 1998, just under 24,000. I don't know how many Washingtonians are on this webinar today, but the Washington Growth Management Act has really incentivized urban unincorporated areas to incorporate as cities. And then also, it really has had a tremendous influence on having cities and counties and multi-county organizations plan together. So for the City of Kenmore to work with neighboring cities, but also with King County and the transit agency is like a very natural thing for us. One of the things that happened right when the city became its own city is that the staff got to work on doing local plans and a downtown plan in particular with more kind of urban features, because the corridor itself was very highway oriented in terms of no sidewalks to speak of, lots of curb cuts, and a lot of commercial uses that were very highway oriented. So we've made some good progress on spearheading some downtown development, and I'll show you a little bit about that more. And I'll also say that it's important to know a bit about Kenmore is that, as I said, the community is really open to progress and to changes, and is enjoying having some of the amenities that have come into the downtown in recent years. We'll also talk about the city's role in spearheading that downtown development. But in this case, we're not a property owner at, as you said, you heard earlier, St. Vincent de Paul and Metro and other private property owners are at the center of this TOD area that we're going to be focusing on today. I will tell you that there has been like big support for transit use in general for a number of years, but for this bus rapid transit project, the community and neighboring communities really turned out and advocated, to the point of showing up at Sound Transit board meetings with these wonderful t-shirts that says 522 BRT now. And we actually had a few of those left at City Hall, so I thought I would show you some of the vestige of that really strong community support. Next slide, please, Dwight. I told you about the improvements that were really key on the 522 corridor, like about 90 million with funding partners, and Sound Transit has been one of those. But you can see, and this is the photo on the left, 68th or 61st Avenue, which is the westernmost station for the BRT. This is what a lot of the corridor looked like at one time. Very unsafe, no, obviously no dedicated transit lane. and then look at the difference after the improvements. And it's made a huge difference for transit mobility and efficiency. And I think we're well prepared along the corridor here for the BRT to get started. Next slide, please. Now, I talked about downtown redevelopment. This is one of the first planning efforts was a downtown plan. And this is about part of a 9.6 acre purchase that the City of Kenmore did in the early 2000s. And this is what we wanted to redevelop. And it took a while. We were in a development agreement with one developer between 2007 and 2012, and then parted ways amicably. And then had another community revisioning of the project, and the current owner of most of this property has done a great job in putting those city plans into action. I will say that the city bought this lovely commercial area in about 2003 and 2005, just under 10 acres. So next slide shows you some of the public buildings in downtown. And as you know, sometimes it takes public investment to kind of set the tone about and about the city's vision for future development. So Kenmore City Hall was really the first new building in this area in a number of years. Sits on a strategic corner, 1 block north of the 522 corridor on 68th Avenue. So this, we feel, really set an early statement about what should follow in this area. It's a LEED Gold structure and has won awards for one, including the coolest city hall in the state of Washington. The building on the right is more recent, and it's in the context of that redeveloped area that you saw in the before photo. This sits on the key corner spot of 68th and 181st, and it is a community gathering spot. It's a city-owned building, but there's a vendor selling coffee and light meals inside, and it's become a very beloved gathering spot in downtown. So next slide, please. So remember that before picture. Well, this is what it looks like now. There's over 300 units of housing that have been built over the last number of years by the developer, which is Main Street. This is won national awards as well. City Hall, which you saw before, is on the left side of the street as you're looking at it. And then the transit stop at 522 and 68th is just 1 block down here. So it's going to be, it is very convenient to transit. And as you can see, it looks way different than it did before. And we're very happy to be working with the development partners on that. I'm going to show you another photo of another perspective of that corridor. The 522 corridor is on your left, and then right next to it, and then parallel is the regional Bert Gilman Trail, a very long bike trail that goes down into the city of Seattle, and then hooks up with another trail system on the east side of Lake Washington. Another thing about this photo shows you the lakefront and there's a Sammamish River, which is joins Lake Washington up here. And the largest commercial seaplane base in the continental US is headquartered right in this area, Kenmore Air. They turned 75 years old this summer. And we're in a pretty good position to possibly have a passenger ferry stop in Kenmore. This is a regional effort that is underway to study the future of expanding passenger ferries in the Puget Sound area. So, and that passenger ferry would go to Seattle, probably dock very near the University of Washington campus. And I should mention also that there is a branch campus of the University of Washington in Bothell, which is our next door neighbor to the east. So next slide, please. TOD regulations in Kenmore were adopted in 2015. And the area that is designated for these regulations includes the property that we're going to be talking about, plus some area to the east where there is quite a lot of development potential. And it provides a higher density incentive to projects along with an affordable housing requirement. So it is an opt-in sort of structure at this point. Also, it is one of two areas, including the Kenmore Village area that we just took a look at, which has the incentive for multifamily property tax incentive, which is something that the state authorizes. So this has been in effect for that area, like east of 73rd, where St. Vincent's is, for a few years, but we've not had any projects opt in for it. And at this point, our planning commission is, as part of a comprehensive plan update, going to be looking at these changes, at these regulations, and should we consider any changes. We're excited about very much the prospect for development at 73rd. There are some very nearby amenities that I think make it really attractive. Next slide, please, Dwight. Here's part of the Bert Gilman Trail, which is this picture was taken directly across the street, across 522 from the St. Vincent's and Park and Ride area. So Bert Gilman Trail, very heavily used, and a very nice addition over the last several years. Close by there as well, we have a growing craft brew district, and really pleasant place for people to hang out and be with friends, and we hope that continues sometime soon too. And another thing is that there's a large park that is undergoing some improvements also on this side of 522, right in this immediate vicinity, and it has direct access to the Sammamish River and water sports. So we think that it's going to be just a really interesting spot to redevelop. So next slide, please. So we feel like it's not very often that one project can make real progress on multiple goals, like affordable housing, environmental protection, supporting transit, and multimodal travel. We feel like that whatever happens at this property is going to have to be workable for Sound Transit and Metro, as far as the operational things about the parking and bus layover area. But for the city, we're going to be living with the results of what happens here for many decades. And we feel like we've had really good success in kind of setting the tone with our downtown development that we just showed you. And this property has the same potential because when people see, like, wow, look at what's happened to this corner and this area, and all the amenities and affordable housing opportunities, that is going to inspire more investment and more interest in Kenmore. So although we're not leading the charge and in terms of selling the property or owning any property here, we see ourselves as sometimes the convener. Obviously, we're the regulator. Maybe we'll be a conciliator, but we're very excited to be partnering with the two transit agencies on this. And we had a chance to brief the city council on this project and a draft concurrence agreement that we're working on. We briefed them a few weeks ago. Council was very, very interested and enthusiastic about this great opportunity. So with that, I will wrap up and just let you know that we feel like the stars are in alignment now. The time is right, and you know, we're a community that embraces positive change. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. My name is Juan Kelloff, and I'm the Senior Land Use Transit Planner with Sound Transit that was involved in this project. I'm going to talk about the Sound Transit planning perspective. And as Dwight mentioned, this was really a community-focused planning process. So we want to go over that. Next slide, please. So here in front of you, you see the existing conditions of what the site was like for us to start working on. So it's essentially a 7-acre property that's comprised of two parcels, and KC Metro owns the one to the right or to the east, the bigger property. That's a 5-acre lot. And then on the west side, they leased a property that's about 2 acres, and they lease it from St. Vincent de Paul, as Dwight had mentioned in the introduction. The park and ride right now has a total of 627 stalls, and then a third of those really sit on the St. Vincent de Paul site. And there are currently three transit stops. So the BRT Stride along 522 is going to have 12 stops, and 3 of them fall in the city of Kenmore. And there's going to be a station pair right here and along 522. And then it's worth mentioning that there's already 8 bus routes that are served by transit partners, King County Metro, and also 1 express bus, ST Express 522, that is served there today at the park and ride. And there's also 7 layover spaces for buses to layover. So as part of our planning process, we engage multiple stakeholders. So not just both transit agencies were at the table, but the city really provided a space for us to host the workshops at City Hall. And we invited the adjacent property owners to participate in this process. So as it's been mentioned, St. Vincent de Paul is a key stakeholder here, given that they have a lease relationship with King County Metro. And so there was that existing relationship, but we also wanted to reach out further, and we invited the Montessori School to the north, which is adjacent to the property, and also a smaller commercial property, which you see at the bottom, kind of sandwiched between the St. Vincent de Paul and the King County Metro sites. And that whole area, just as a side note, is about 10 acres total, plus of including all the parcels you see on the screen. But we also invited, it was important for us to have the affordable housing funders at the table, and at Sound Transit, we have a TOD policy, and understanding equitable TOD as a piece of the puzzle was key. So we wanted to have that conversation early on. So they were there too. And next slide, please. And so, yeah, the transit program elements that Sound Transit had in the SD3 was really just is delivering the high capacity transit through the VRT stride. So I mentioned that already, but also adding a new park and ride stalls at this location. So that was kind of the impetus for this project and kind of the charge that we had. And then other transit elements that we investigated in the process was really like the notion of the existing surface stalls at the park and ride today, and what to do if they were displaced to produce the final stall count. So the future expansion of the bus capacity was also explored. So KC Metro would expand to nine layovers in the future, and also have a facility for active bus bays and drop and pickup space, which would all eventually, as you will see in the further slides, it sits all in the ground floor of the facility, and then above there's the room for the parking. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about this participatory planning work that really took place for this project. Next slide. So what was the purpose for us to conduct these workshops? And really, it was, well, we wanted to engage the stakeholders and adjacent property owners to really understand what their thoughts were for the site, and that would help us inform the design decisions that we had to make to place the garage, and really understand the potential for future TOD there, which was also something that King County Metro was interested in. So both agencies were aligned in that vision, and then we really wanted to align our public investment and our partners' vision to achieve the best possible outcomes at this site, and really understand the surroundings, and before we made decisions on moving forward with our project and ensuing environmental review process. So we really wanted to collaborate on this visioning and evaluation process with the objective of achieving what we call ultimately the coordinated development plan for these properties. And really eventually this would inform also our TOD feasibility analysis, which was conducted after the workshops took place. Next slide, please. So what did the workshops look like? So over the course of about 6 months in the year 2009, we took a series of workshops. We had 3 total, and the first was really bringing the partners together, stakeholders, and setting goals and creating a vision for the place, and really aligning ourselves and providing direction for the future workshop, which was going to be concepts development. So workshop 2 was really the space setup. We set up the table to really do participatory design. And you can see an image of the screen of what that looked like to really guide with, we had experts, architects on the table with us to really facilitate a process to help partners and stakeholders understand what the possibilities were for these properties in the future at this early stage of exploration. So that was key. But also what was interesting is that we decided to take all the participants to the site itself before the workshop. So we gave them a little tour and they were able to see what's on the ground there today. What are the transit needs? What is the capacity there today, but also understanding some of the environmental features around, like the great blue heron rookery that's nearby. And that was key. And also the relationship to Kenmore's downtown. So workshop 3, we came back with the 3 concepts and refined them a little bit more internally, but then the group was able to choose one that would move forward because it met the vision of what everybody wanted to see in Kenmore Park and Ride, and then that carries forward to the environmental review, which is taking place now. Next slide, please. So the key question for the workshops that helped us kind of kicked it off was how does a future garage location and configuration help to establish an urban development framework for the Kenmore Park and Ride side. Next, please. Next slide. So we look at different components essentially. So the first is, the driver for this project is really the transit service and really understanding how to meet our transit needs as a transit agency. So what was the new BRT service going to look like? Basically coming through 522, but also supporting what we call the transit integration for pedestrians and riders to move from one system to the other, from KC Metros to ours. So we really understand that the best location for a facility would be one that would be integrated, that would have all the transit uses on the ground floor, and then the commuter parking above. So there was very easy access, good access for everybody. And that was a key thing. We call this the mobility hub concept. And then of course we needed to understand what the general traffic flow would be in and out of the site, and also the pedestrian flow. So those were some of the other things that we looked at. Next slide, please. The other key thing here, and maybe some of you noticed in the Kenmore City logo, the great blue heron is a natural resource here that needs to be protected, and it happens to be really close, adjacent to the site. So just about 500 feet from the new location, there it is, a heron rookery, which was key and really help us locate the garage, but also understand what kind of configuration the garage needed. So we had to meet with representatives of Fish and Wildlife and really identify some of the seasonal buffers that need to be respected, especially for the breeding season of these precious birds, and really help understand how to deal with things from this new development that would result, like light pollution and noise pollution issues. So how do we deal with those to protect the wildlife while we're working on our design? And then also that you can see in the more cloudy pattern, there's a wetlands that's adjacent to the site, and there's some critical buffers there that also needed to be protected. So that's something we worked on to ensure that we didn't encroach those wetlands. Next slide, please. And really going back to access, another key feature, and Nancy really described as well, is just south of the 522 is the Bert Gilman Trail, and we really want to understand what the potential would be for a connection that could that it could improve access to that bike trail and really understand what kind of future bikeway flow could happen through the site. So that's some of the more magenta-ish lines that you see through the screen and curves. And then also really understand what capacity could happen for pedestrian alleyway. So if we were going to place TOD, but it was, very close adjacent to the location of the mobility hub, as you can see on that magenta bar, we would have something that would look like an alleyway or pedestrian boon earth that could really help establish a spine for pedestrians to or Kenmore residents to walk through, and also enjoy eventually the access to the wetlands from the same paths if that was something that was pursued in the future. Next slide, please. So what about TOD? So we really wanted to explore the potential for TOD here at this location, and it was really an opportunity to really understand that this integrated mobility hub location, which you see in the southeast of the sites, really allows for freeing up more land for development to the parcels to the west. So if there's TOD potential already for the site in King County, there would also be potential to the west on the least side if that's something that St. Vincent would want to pursue moving forward. So really understanding with the affordable housing partners in the table, what kind of TOD should this be? Should it be 100% affordable or a mix of market rate and affordable in the future? So these are some of the questions that are going to be explored by our transit partner Metro in the future phase of this project, and also questions of who will lead this solicitation. Should it be a master development solicitation or kind of pieces that get put out for RFPs? And those were some of the important questions that kind of came out of this planning process, which are now being explored, and you'll hear more. Next slide, please. And then, ultimately what you see on the screen, this was what our diagram that we came up for just development, this vision of place here at Kenmore. It was really a balance of these four key elements, really the mobility hub, which was needed to support the transit needs from both agencies, and it's the initial driver, and it consolidates the transit program into one destination to provide better access for ridership, but also the balance with the nature piece. So there's this great blue heron rookery. It's a treasured natural resource and it needs to be protected. So this was a key component and help us understand how to organize the site. And then really understanding the community that's there today and the connection that the opportunity that this exists right now that in the proximity to downtown community of Kenmore, but also some of the connections to the Bert Gilman, so the biking community, and I think Nancy mentioned like the Brew Road, which is just there south of 522, which is kind of very adjacent to the site, and then also ultimately understanding our partners' needs. So St. Vincent de Paul really provides community services already as a nonprofit. They have a mission and they provide social services today to the Kenmore community, but also to other communities in King County. And so they had their needs that need to be met, and we had to coordinate with them. So that's still going forward to understand how we can both meet our needs. So I think that's part of the uniqueness of this project that they have been involved early on, and that has been really important for this work. Next slide, please. So finally, what you see here is the resulting concept that we took to our environmental review for what we call the integrated mobility hub. So this really contains 3 levels of parking above the ground floor transit facility, And again, this concept will be freeing up land for TOD to the west, so it doesn't preclude TOD. It actually sets it up in a good way for the future to develop up to potentially 400 units of housing, depending on the configuration. But what you see on the screen, it could be up to like four buildings, depending on the way that the parcels eventually are arranged and the buildings are arranged. But this was one of the early studies that we did just to prove that it could work. So there are still some challenges around meeting the overall parking goals. So what's going to be the right balance between the resulting commuting parking and the resulting residential parking? Can some of this be shared? And there's some compatible uses with non-commuting hours and commuter hours with the synergies with residential parking and commuter parking from the park and ride. So that's something that's going to be explored further as we move this along, and I'm sure as the TOD offering moves ahead, that will be explored. And I just wanted to mention that after the workshops, we really during 2020 we conducted the TOD analyses, the feasibility analysis with our consultants, and then we also evaluated some of the TOD delivery options to understand how this could be done and some of the implementation options. And this document has been completely, this process has been completely documented. And there's a TOD planning report that we shared with the Kenmore City Council, and we presented to them, as Nancy mentioned a little bit in her presentation. Next slide, please. So finally, here we are in the coordinated development plan. You see a rendering in the screen of what you saw before, but also just wanted to mention that we're exploring right now actively an alternative delivery strategy to essentially maximize the development outcomes here. And given the COVID pandemic and some of the agency realignment process that's taking place, we think that some of these alternative delivery options could potentially deliver a transit program with less upfront capital investment, but also develop more importantly, delivered on the vision development workshops. And with that, I'm going to transfer it to next slide, please. I'm gonna hand it off to Sarah from King County Metro, who will share where we're going from here from Metro's perspective. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Juan. All right, so we obviously have had a pretty lengthy, very involved, really like fruitful exploration and community process. And now it's really, we're at this pivot point where we need to figure out how to implement the vision. So where do we go from here? Next slide, please. Juan mentioned that we landed on this integrated mobility hub concept. And it is a great concept in that it is really responsive to the needs of the Herons. It also, it stacks all of the transit uses so that from a rider's perspective, everything is in one spot, which is really helpful. And from a transit-oriented development perspective, it frees up sort of it creates the largest opportunity for transit-oriented development to be consolidated on the other side of the site. The challenge with the preferred plan is that Juan did mention this as well, it's pretty capital intensive, both for Sound Transit and for King County Metro. And both agencies and the City of Kenmore certainly are very committed to realizing that vision here in Kenmore. But as a result of COVID, we've had to be more creative about how we might get there. Certainly the transit agencies will require partners to provide additional funding to make that vision a reality. But as the property owner and as the lessee to the St. Vincent de Paul property, King County Metro is in a really unique position to lead the way in an alternative delivery strategy whereby we use our role as owner and lessee. And we've been in this lease with St. Vincent de Paul for about 20 years. we have 50 years left on that term. And we do think that our existing relationship with them is really valuable as we think through how to best realize this vision here. I think also really importantly, in thinking through the pros and cons of an alternative delivery strategy, we're doing that collaboratively. So all the project partners are sitting around a table every week or two, really hashing out what might work. How could we realize this vision? Next slide. Okay, so what is the opportunity for King County Metro? In the orange is just the site that we own. It's the 5-acre site, and then you'll see just adjacent to it the additional surface parking. In the northern part of the site, that is the parking that we lease. This park and ride before COVID was always about 90% capacity or greater before 9 a.m. There's a lot of transit use typically at this location, and we imagine with the investment that Sound Transit is making, that will only grow. But I think, like many things this past year, and in general, Metro has certainly been trying to push itself to be more of a mobility agency than just a transit agency, and to be really creative and strategic about how we manage and invest in parking. I think because of sort of the pause of life this year, and where this project was when the COVID pandemic began, it's given us the opportunity to really think about whether this is a project where we could be more creative. Maybe we have to be more creative if we're going to try to realize the vision of the workshops. And so our desire at the site is to really accommodate the robust transit program that both Sound Transit and King County Metro need to be successful providing transit to the region in the future, but also explore innovative parking strategies that really facilitate the best development outcome on the site possible. Next slide. So Metro has a long history with transit-oriented development. The agency has been delivering transit-oriented development projects for about 20 years. And we have done complicated projects that involve multiple cities and affordable housing and market rate housing and mixed use and a parking garage before. That image down there on the right is of our South Kirkland Park and Ride, which has an affordable building and a market building and a garage. It was complicated because there are multiple cities involved. That's right on the border of 2 cities in East King County. So we've done that before and had success. So complicated projects are a challenge, but they're not scary. I think also importantly, between sort of over the same time period as we've been working on the Kenmore project, King County Metro has also been developing our own equitable transit-oriented communities policy that really pushes Metro to be both proactive in how we use our properties for our transit purpose and to accomplish other goals around affordable housing and community development. And it also pushes us to really think about the relationship between land use and regulations, and also productive transit use. So it sort of all has happened at the right time as we've been considering as an agency how to really start to be much more strategic about how we consider development as a part of our overall transit purpose. This project has been a really fantastic exploration of what that might mean. So it's exciting. And again, like Nancy said earlier, the timing has just really synced up well for us to think through how to best realize this project that we're all very excited about. Next slide. So how do we implement this vision? I think all the speakers have talked about the real importance of not only the transit agencies and the city being in alignment, but also being really responsive to the adjacent property owner. Juan mentioned that King County Metro owns our 5-acre site, but also, really we see one of the things that's so exciting about this project is that there is so much mission alignment between Sound Transit, Metro, the City of Kenmore, and actually St. Vincent de Paul, who as a service provider that's long been in the Kenmore area, who has interest in affordable housing. It all kind of coalesces around this opportunity that we might have to support and bring to life this much larger development outcome. So really what we need to do as we think about a master development solicitation probably, is be flexible and to realize that, you know, each party probably has to be flexible in a different way to make this a reality. Collaboration, continued collaboration is really important as we think through developing a shared set of project requirements. And then developing an approach that meets all the parties' needs. This is especially important. This project for Sound Transit is a commitment through their ST3, which is their ST3 plan, which was voter approved. So they have certain deliverables that need to happen as a part of this project. And then when we think about the possibility of including St. Vincent de Paul, a fantastic partner who's been really supportive in this process, but who has a very, who's not that familiar with commercial development, you know, they just have different needs. And so we really have to be transparent and thoughtful about how to best support all the different parties to get to the decisions that we all need to make in order to move forward with this potential master development solicitation or whatever, you know, whatever instrument we might end up using. Juan had mentioned it could be one, it could be a phased approach, but no matter what form it takes, I think the key to success here is transparent, open communication and an acknowledgement that we all have different levels of comfort with the project as we move forward and different needs in order to, you know, move through the decisions that each of our management would need to make this happen. Next slide. So we've mentioned these partners, but I think it's important to sort of mention them again. The City of Kenmore has been a great champion of this project. It's been really, really helpful. Also, Nancy mentioned that they've had this TOD overlay zone since 2015. That's been enormously important to both transit agencies as we think about realizing a project that meets their vision. Then Sound Transit has been a fantastic partner here too, knowing that they're bringing a big investment both in service and in infrastructure to Kenmore has been critical to understanding what the opportunity is at the site. King County Metro, as the property owner and the lessee of the St. Vincent de Paul land, we manage that relationship with St. Vincent de Paul. And also, you know, we could potentially be a long-term owner or certainly an investor in new transit infrastructure here as well. And then in support roles, St. Vincent de Paul, obviously is the adjacent owner and potential participant. They could have a much larger role, but certainly they're supporting us in thinking through what kinds of outcomes they're comfortable with. And then Juan had mentioned that we still have a body of work in front of us to create a strategic approach to affordable housing across the sites. And we are really looking to our partners at King County, our Department of Community and Human Services, as well as ARCH, which is a regional coalition for housing. And it's a group, they represent 13 cities in East King County, and they are effectively the housing experts. They also have money that supports affordable housing projects as well. So we're looking to them to help us really think through what the strategic approach to affordable housing should look like and how we would integrate that into any future solicitation. Next slide. So what's the work in front of us? Well, it's not straightforward exactly, but we need to develop an implementation strategy, and that gets back at that alternative delivery strategy. So really thinking about how we're going to do this. We need to align public investments. So Juan had mentioned the realignment Sound Transit is going through, and King County Metro is also looking at possibly leveraging land value or you know, trying to bring as much as we can to the table. We're looking at the City of Kenmore to identify their preferred permit path for the project. And then again, we need to identify the affordable housing strategy that we'd like to embed in any future solicitation. And then lastly, we're looking to all the partners to really solidify what they need for project requirements, business terms, and you know, with support and work with St. Vincent de Paul, we need to confirm the size of the offering. We certainly could move forward with just the property that King County Metro owns, but that being that we have this sort of this pretty large parking count that we would want to produce at Kenmore, really the larger opportunity seems to lie in either proceeding with our site and the site that we lease for parking with St. Vincent de Paul, or potentially, their store site too, if they were willing or open to that. If only because when you start to get a larger site, I think Juan had mentioned out there now, there are 627 stalls, and Sound Transit is bringing another 300. So you start parking, as it often does, is driving the calculus in how much development can fit in these sites, in addition to the transit infrastructure that we need to provide there. So we have some work in front of us to really confirm what we're offering. And again, are we offering it in one master development solicitation? Is it going to be phased? So those are the things in front of us now. Next slide. And so the potential timeline, Nancy mentioned that we'd gone to talk to City Council at Kenmore recently to talk about an agreement that sort of outlines a process to get to that future solicitation. We're doing that now. And then we are looking at basically spending the balance of the year, both developing content for that future solicitation and engaging the development community on how to best package an offering. We're hoping that all of that work can be done in time to release an RFP sometime in 2022, so that we could open a project at about the same time that Sound Transit's BRT services is hoping to start, which at this point looks like it's 2025 or 2026. So there's some flexibility, and certainly the work in front of us still will impact the timing. And I think the big red arrow at the top about COVID is just to say that we had a much more solid sense of when things needed to be delivered before COVID hit. So there's a little bit of flexibility on timing potentially, and also there's still a need to really drill down and understand when the project needs to be delivered to do so in time for the service. So that's where we're at. And with that, I will turn it back over to Dwight. Thank you all so much.
Okay, thanks to Nancy and Juan and Sarah. And actually, I'm going to turn the screen control back over to Hillary, so that we can start going through questions. And we have a lot of them. Let's see. Maybe let's just start diving into them, and we'll see how far we get through these. And I can go back into the screen share if we need to look at things here. In terms of can we get copies of the presentations, I think that's a pretty straight yes. Revolution does make the presentations available, so that one's an easy one. Second one, and I'm going in the order that they came in, with TOD and affordable housing development, do the plans and cost structures build in a strategy for transit fare incentive, meaning free or deeply discounted transit passes provided to tenants of the affordable housing. Maybe Juan, Sarah, can I kick that one your way?
Sure. I'm happy to talk about that a little bit. So in our region, we have a reduced fare program for low-income residents. So if folks that are living in an affordable housing project qualify for the reduced fare program, I think the limit that is set right now is 2 times the federal poverty level. So you do have to be pretty low income to qualify. But if you are in that income bracket, there's already a program that exists. King County Metro does offer pass programs for that would be available to affordable housing projects. And I think Sound Transit also has had a history of working with developers to provide passes in some TOD program or projects. So it's not something that's done all the time, but would definitely be, there is an opportunity for that, certainly.
Okay, have another one here. I skipped over a couple before, but let me do this one and then I'll jump back. Are federal funds being used in this project, and or is there a federal interest in the existing parking ride facility? And I can give a short answer to that. This is not a federal project at this point in time. It is funded through local area funds. I won't say there may never be federal funds, but at this point it is being viewed as a locally funded project. Juan or Sarah, want to add anything to that?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that the park and ride lot does have federal participation. I think it's at 80%.
Okay. All right. The one that I hadn't picked up on before, in terms of the three-stage public engagement, how many people participated, and was it the same people more or less each time? Juan?
Yeah, I can take that, Dwight. There was probably, and I have the number somewhere, but at the top of my head, I would say there was about 50 or so participants in each workshop. And for the most part, it was the same folks, except it's, as you can imagine, some of the staff from different agencies were able to attend, or planners were able to attend some, but there was continuity from each agency, that which was key to have, including the partners. And we always made sure that the property owners were there as well, or a representative that could speak on their behalf. So yeah, that was key to have. But it was about 50 or so, and we split into groups of in smaller groups. And one occasion, I think there was 4 tables to explore the design. So really, at a table level, you want to be in the 8 to 10 range to have that engagement and facilitation that people can really follow. Anything bigger than that, it kind of starts. It gets a little lost for some folks. So yeah, that was part of it.
Yeah, and I guess I would add that this the engagement that Juan described was done in the context of a much larger project community engagement process that has been ongoing as part of the BRT project. And we've had attendees at regular series of both face-to-face early in the project, and then virtual events that have probably totaled almost 1,000 people over the course of the project. And we've also done extensive online outreach as well that has reached up to our most current one had a participation of up around approaching 4,000 people. That's as of last week. That's real current. So it's been a very large public engagement process here. I'll go to the next one that I see here. Do the ST3 plans include funds for a 300 stall garage and replacement layover facilities? Yet those funds are subject to reset. The vision is constrained by budget. I can maybe start on this one and let the other folks participate as well. But yes, I'll say that the vision is constrained by budget. But in the context of the answer here, the ST3 plans do include funds for the 300 stall garage and the replacement layover facilities. And yes, they are subject to reset, and we're all waiting on the Sound Transit Board and others in the region to help us understand how the reset will happen. So, Juan?
Yeah, I would echo what you say, and also understanding that this realignment process will take at least through the summer to come up with a decision. But this really comes from a perspective of really having lower project revenues and higher project costs. So we're at a point where we have to reevaluate all that. But yeah, the original ST3 project is the 300 stall parking garage. And then maybe Sarah, you can speak to Metro's piece on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we're talking about the funds resetting and what that would do to the project and implementing the project. I mean, I think one of the things we are trying to do with this alternative delivery strategy is, you know, create a process that can be that sort of is based on the level of investment the transit agencies have, and provides the opportunity to leverage things that we might not have been able to leverage in the originally envisioned project where Sound Transit was going to be delivering the integrated mobility hub. And by that, I mean, Metro is exploring things like trying to use its land value and you know, we're turning over rocks, I suppose, to think about this, but certainly it is constrained by the realities of budget, because that is just where we're at. But I do think that we have been really thoughtful in, you know, how we might design a future solicitation where whatever amount of money is available from the transit agencies, whatever amount of funding may be available for affordable housing, we could look at attaching it to a solicitation in a way that would give the developers that would respond more certainty and could potentially get them to perform based on what they know they have. But certainly the project is constrained by budget, yeah.
Okay. The next question that I have here is, are you finding that negotiating with multiple entities adds time to the project? How long is it taking you to complete these projects on average? I don't know, Juan, do you want me to start with that, and the rest of you folks can jump in? Because this is reaching a little bit into the unknown, because we don't know what's going to happen going forward. I guess I will answer the first part of that question about, are you finding that negotiating with multiple entities adds time to the project? We're 3 years into this right now. Actually 4 if you 4 plus if you measure from when the ST3 measure passed. I think we're actually finding that negotiating with working with multiple partners, I'll say, rather than negotiating, has actually I think saved us time, or at least helped us find better solutions during this 3 years. I see nods from Sarah and Nancy and Juan, because that's what we've been doing, and that applies to this project as well as the overall context of the project that we're working in. So the answer is, it probably takes more time not to work with multiple entities than it does to work with them. And this has been a really good example of how to work together. So and you know, in terms of what it'll take beyond here, and Sarah cited that potential 2026 opening date that kind of points toward a 5-year horizon out there on this, and we don't know if that's what's going to be feasible or not, because one of the questions that all of the agencies, Sound Transit and King County and you know, the city and everybody else in the region is dealing with is what can we do with project schedules in the context of current revenues and current ridership. So, next one I see here that I'll throw out to the panel is, was a market analysis prepared if when the market would support that level of development? The short answer is yes. The long answer I'll defer to Juan and Sarah and Nancy.
Yeah, at this point, thanks for the question. We had our consultants, Kidder Matthews, prepare TOD feasibility analysis to really understand what was the market like there. Is there a market for apartments and housing? And yes, the answer, as you can see from what Nancy was showing, Kenmore is a pretty strong housing market right now. And the analysis was really predicated more on really understanding market rate product with also for affordable housing. And I think the next step of this process will be to take a deeper dive in the affordability. And I think Sarah was speaking a little bit to this, really understand what's going to be the appropriate AMI thresholds or commitments for each of the affordable housing pieces. So that's what I could say to that. And we created a report that was really foundational in understanding what could happen there with documented pro formas for development and based on concepts that were developed by our architects, our consulting architects. So yeah, it was a process that's really holistic, because we're taking it from the workshops to the reality check and making those refinements along the way. I'll leave it there.
Okay, next one is what are the traffic impacts during morning and evening peak hours projected? We have done detailed traffic studies on the parking facility. Honestly, the traffic studies for the development piece that would fall under King County Metro at this point still have to be done. I won't say that we've turned a blind eye to that, but the very specific traffic impacts that are associated with the garage in its current configuration, as well as the existing park and ride and the bus layover facility are all factored into the traffic analysis that was done for the BRT project, and it is built into the project to be built as part of the BRT.
Mm-hmm.
So the other parts of the question are, what is the potential non-commuter traffic that would be attracted to the center based on the renderings? That's a future study that would need to be done. But the city's very much on board. I don't know, Nancy, do you want to add anything on that?
No, I think that we're very open to these other types of uses and just really making the most out of this resource. And I did see some mention of on the question and answer too of are there services within walking distance of this site. And, we're certainly very, very interested in kind of hitting the sweet spot of commercial uses on the site too. There are lots of, grocery, drugstores, other kinds of retail offerings close by and certainly in walking distance. But I myself am very interested in what are some services that can be right on the site too, so that there's an opportunity for people to, in the future, to gather together or to take care of retail needs on site too. So we're very open to that.
Okay. All right. Does the BRT have dedicated lanes? The BRT has what we call bat lanes. And what a bat lane does is its first function is to provide the bus access. The second function is that bat lanes also allow right turns. So people who need to access a business or to make a right turn at an intersection have access to the lane in proximity to that turn. But principally, the dedicated lanes are bat lanes, and those actually already exist in Kenmore. The bat lane work happens elsewhere on the project in other parts of the corridor. Let's see, how does the hub and site connect to the apartments and other neighborhoods to the east? Juan, maybe that's a good one for you.
Well, I forgot to mention this piece, but one of the things that the city was also hoping for is as the parcels to the west get developed, there could be an opportunity to provide an access that's more robust, that provides a future east-west connection. So that would be your connection to the eastern side, not the downtown, but rather the parcels to the east that are well poised for future redevelopment if that were to be the case. But also preserving our buffer for the wetlands. So we have it in the study as a potential to happen if there is that funding availability in the future and the desire to pursue that.
Mhm. I'll just chime in as well, and that's one thing, part of the whole corridor development is putting in sidewalks where there were no sidewalks, and so those already exist, both east and west, and north and south.
Okay, next question that I see here, I think we've probably already addressed, but I'll say hi, Ken. What market assessment was done to determine what development could fit here? I don't know, Juan, that was part of what you already answered, but maybe you could give us a little bit of a flavor of what range Kidder looked at.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at office product and basically hotel. So the conclusion was that hotel and apartments were the markets that were strongly suited for this location. Of course, there's a TOD overlay, zoning here. So there's an incentive also to the affordable housing. So that's a strong suit there. We didn't think that commercial that requires the parking need and things like that would be ideal for this site. But there was essentially a market study conducted, and that was shared with our partners as a part of this process.
Okay, the next one, this is maybe a little bit, Jack Wismer had asked another question that was kind of related to this one too, that I seem to remember involved the breweries too. But are the agencies considering using diurnal use of the parking? Then it says that is an entertainment venue or church that would use the parking at non-commute times. Maybe Sarah, Juan, you want to address that?
Sure. I think, one of the things that we have really spent some time thinking about and talking with the city about is how you balance the parking for the commuters with parking that would be associated with any future development. And I think we landed in a place where we think that there's a pretty strong call for shared parking, which is already allowed in Kenmore code. So that's one thing that I don't know that we hit on hard enough is just how Kenmore code is so supportive of all these various, all these various explorations we're making into how to make this happen. While we may end up asking for more or less, or some flexibility, it's already there. They've already shown support in their existing code. So yes, we have been thinking about sort of what the role of a shared parking might be, and whether that gets us to a place where we get to where we meet the needs a little bit better. And use that parking investment to the best way we can.
And I agree. And, we're very supportive of, not only the shared parking, but making sure that the space is not static, and it can be enlivened, as appropriate, and because it's a resource, and I think there's all kinds of possibilities on how that can happen.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll just mention that we have been exploring shared parking at other locations. Those that are familiar with the Kingsgate location, where we have an investment there, and we have a group at Sound Transit that's really looking with a finer lens to how shared parking could be achieved, but also understanding how revenues could be generated. And it's kind of a win-win if you think about it with compatible uses, if it works right, because all those TOD units are going to need parking, but a lot of them is not utilized during the commuter time and vice versa. So how could we make that work? And then the city's really, as you can see, very strong collaborator and really helping us achieve that vision. So that's a really good piece of it.
I think we're more or less at time. Let's see, I'm looking to see if there's anything here that we could answer quickly.
Dwight, I saw one that I can answer super quickly. And
Sure, Nancy.
there was a question about was a former park and ride and drive-in movie theater location built on, and the answer is yes. That was the first phase of the downtown development that I talked about earlier in my presentation. So there was a drive-in theater in Kenmore at one time, and which later became, guess what, a King County Park and Ride lot, and the city bought that property from the county and sold it to the development company.
Okay. There are more good questions here, but more good questions than we have time to answer. So